Before I begin, I want to say how very sorry I am to hear of the death of Brother Kevin Crowley, who's passed away. I want to offer condolences to everybody who loved him. Brother Kevin's work at the Capuchin Day Centre is the stuff of legend. He really was a champion for the poor and for everyone who fell on hard times. Without judgment and without exception, he lived for others, and he absolutely changed lives. So we will all feel his loss very greatly. Ireland has lost a great son. Indeed, Cork has lost his beloved Cork, has also lost a true legend. So Ariesje Gorev Anam. Minister, yesterday I was contacted by a mother at her wit's end. She's two daughters in college. She told me that she and her husband are just about to cover the costs of that. She talked about the pressure they're under to pay for the accommodation. She likened it to a second mortgage. So this mother could not believe her ears when Minister Lawless announced that government will hike up student fees by €1,000. She asked, where in the name of God do they think we will find an extra £2 grand? And thousands of students and their parents are in the same position. Now, the worry, the stress, the uncertainty of having to come up with that money. And yesterday, my colleague, Pierce Doherty, twice asked you a very simple question. What will students and their families be asked to pay? Will it be €2,000 or €3,000? And twice you refused to answer. When asked by reporters yesterday if a fee hike is coming, Micheál Martin was dismissive. He talked about budgetary processes instead of being upfront about the bills students and their parents will face in a few weeks. He was clear on one thing, and that is that there will be no cost of living package. He said that clearly, so obviously the fees are going up. And Taoiseach Simon Harris couldn't have been more cavalier. Listen to this. He said, if I was the parent of a child going to college today, I'd be saying, do what happened last year, what happened the year before, and the year before that. Pay in instalments, and let's see where the budget brings us to. Now, how out of touch can you get? We're not talking about a few quid here. We are talking about €1,000 per student. That's a lot of money for families. Parents can't take a wait-and-see approach. They need to know now, and students need to know now, what will they be paying? You're making the choice to hike student fees at a time when working people and families, as you know, are under pressure with soaring prices. Hit left, hit right and centre, with increases in the cost of food, energy bills, childcare, petrol, diesel, and, as you well know, rent. You name it, and it's through the roof. And now you want to add €1,000 hiking college fees into the mix. This is the flippant, casual attitude of a government that has no problem reinstating big pay packages for top brass executives at bailed out banks, no problem doling out cushy pay increases for your record number of junior ministers, but then pleads the poor mouth when it comes to students and their families. A tale as old as time when it comes to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So cai an rialtas a bheith unrach le Micheál agus le na Jowly, cad a bheith mar táille coláis de acu I bhean for €2,000 no €3,000. Minister, you need to be upfront with students and their families. Dancing on the head of a pin, dodging and refusing to give a straight answer is frankly not acceptable. So I'm going to ask that straightforward question again, and I would like an answer, please. When students are paying their fees for 2025-2026 academic year, what will it be? €2,000 or €3,000?
Thank you, Deputy MacDonald. Minister Chambers.
Thank you very much, Deputy MacDonald, for your question. And just first of all, I want to echo what you've said about Brother Crowley. I think Ireland has lost a wonderful person, someone who brought incredible care, humility and service to support the most vulnerable in our country, and we thank him for his tireless work, and may he rest in peace, and condolences to all of his family. Just in response to your question, first of all, I acknowledge that for many families there is still pressure in their daily lives. Costs are still high, and what we've said in the formation of this government is that the process around Budget 2026 is that the changes we make will be done in a sustained and permanent way, and that covers all policy areas across government. So in the context of further and higher education, Minister Lawless has engaged and will continue to engage with students, with the stakeholders in that particular sector, and that will form the basis of the options paper on the cost of education, which will inform his work in terms of and the negotiation as part of Budget 2026. And that specific detail will inform him about what's possible and how he wants to prioritise the different measures that can be taken on a permanent and sustained basis. You referenced the measures which were taken last year or indeed the previous year. Those measures were taken on a one-off temporary basis in terms of a cost of living package. And how we're approaching Budget 2026 is trying to take measures which can be made on a permanent basis. And the work around that is happening across government about how different ministers will set their priorities out in the context of the budget negotiation process. And I'll be engaging with Minister Lawless in that context following the Summer Economic Statement and the publication of the National Development Plan. One element of obviously the costs for students is on the student contribution fee, but there's also other elements which can help the affordability for students, whether it's in relation to SUSI grants, income thresholds, reckonable income when it comes to the wider grant system that we have across the further and higher education sector. And I think the work that he's doing now in terms of developing that options paper on the cost of education and what are the best measures that he can make in the context of Budget 2026 to support students and households, that will form the basis of his discussion in the context of the budget. And what we've said is that obviously the work that's happening over the coming weeks will inform the overall allocation which will be made available in the context of current expenditure. But we have had a series of interventions over the last number of years. The average rate of expenditure increase has been 9% over the last number of years. And we have uncertainty around us, and we need to be careful about the broader economic and budgetary context. And that's why we're undertaking careful work within government about setting out what's possible in terms of the interplay between current and capital expenditure, and also the changes that we'll make from a tax perspective as well. And what we're saying as a government is that the measures that we'll make for 26 and onwards will be taken in a budgetary context. We're not taking ad hoc decisions in the month of early July when there's a process to be undertaken, and that happens for all government colleagues across the board. We're cognizant of the pressure that families face, whether it's on third level fees, but also the cost of education in primary and secondary level, the continued cost of childcare, the cost of a whole range of services. And we want to strengthen public services, make them more affordable, and that's the medium-term expenditure framework which we'll set out in the coming weeks, and that will form the basis of the broader negotiation.
Time is up, Minister. Thank you.
So, Minister, you've said a lot there, and you have not answered the question. I mean, it's actually, you're the Minister for Public Expenditure, right? This is actually very straightforward. Is it €2,000 or €3,000? On the basis of what you're saying, and according to the logic of your presentation, I'm assuming it's €3,000. Minister Lawless has announced an increase in student fees to €3,000. You need to get up and confirm that. People are waiting for confirmation. Is it €3,000? Because people have to budget for that, Minister. They can't just produce it out of thin air. And it strikes me as a particularly perverse kind of logic that you present, that in order to bring the cost of education down, you're actually going to hike up the cost of student fees. That makes absolutely no sense. Minister, what do you have against students?
Thank you.
I mean, you're going to hike up their rent, now you're going to hike up their fees, and you don't even have the decency to be clear about it.
Minister,
so, please confirm, will students pay €2,000 or €3,000?
Minister to respond.
What I've said very clearly is that the outlook on this will be informed by what we agree as part of Budget 2026. And I mean, this is the hypocrisy of Sinn Féin when it comes to third level fees, because in the north, Minister Archbold at the time wasn't ruling out hikes in student fees. And then she has said in the context of the financial position that she has to work within that. And that's the same for this government when it comes to Budget 2026. When it comes to when it comes to all policy,
Deputy, please.
All basic as that, Mother of God.
All decisions that we'll make for next year will be done in the budget. They'll be done and concluded in the budget process, and that's the same as has happened in previous years. So that's the context that will inform the outlook for 2026, and that's the same for all policy measures.
Thank you, Minister.
It's decided in the budget.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Minister, first I want to also join with others in expressing condolences on the death of Brother Kevin Crowley of the Capuchin Day Centre. I had the pleasure of meeting Brother Kevin, of witnessing the immense work he and his colleagues do, and indeed of experiencing his great sense of humour. So, you know, he will be sadly missed, and just to join with others. Minister, when the idea of a housing SAR was announced some months ago, the question on everyone's lips was the same. What can a SAR possibly do for housing that the Minister cannot achieve himself? Now, the bizarre SAR proposal appears to have been quietly shelved. It's joined a pile of other U-turns on the cutting room floor of government buildings and the Custom House. But it's become increasingly clear that the Minister cannot take the necessary action alone on housing, and that he does need help. Because nearly 6 months since taking office, and in the midst of a severe housing crisis, he's nothing to show for himself. Just 2 bills. One to undo the hames he made of those deeply misguided plans to end rent pressure laws, and the other to be taken next week, a bill to amend the huge new Planning Act that itself is mostly not yet in force. So, I mean, honestly, it's worse than a mere failure to ensure the necessary radical reset. You're actually allowing existing safeguards to fail. You may have now extended rent pressure zones, but you've hollowed them out so that the protections are limited. Rents will go up and evictions will too. Speaking of evictions, you're also starving the tenant in situ scheme so that it's become ineffective. And the tenant in situ scheme was the key measure designed to protect renters and keep families out of homelessness. Last Friday, Minister, the homelessness figures told of an appalling new record: 15,747 people in emergency accommodation, including 4,844 children, each one a personal tragedy for that child and that family. And you would think that in the face of this, the government would ramp up the tenant in situ scheme. But instead you're depriving it of adequate funding, and so the scheme is failing. We're hearing that it's been curtailed or paused in Dublin, in Cork City, in Kildare and elsewhere. And indeed, the Minister has said it will be very difficult to avoid crossing the shameful threshold of 5,000 children in homelessness. You'd think he's a commentator, not the line Minister, overseeing apparent winding down of tenant in situ scheme and harebrained changes to rent pressure zone laws. And all this has consequences, Minister. In 2024, tenant in situ accounted for 2 in 5 homeless preventions in Cork City alone, and that meant 100 children kept out of homelessness. What will happen to families like them now? Increasingly, our TDs and councillors are experiencing a hopelessness, a despair when they're seeking to advise families facing eviction, because there's nothing we can offer. So, Minister, can I ask you, when are we going to see a radical reset from your government? When are we going to see emergency measures to keep the tenant in situ scheme working and ensure that families are kept out of homelessness?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Well, I absolutely reject what you've set out there relating to Minister Brown. If you look at the series of actions and reforms he's taken over the past number of weeks, I think that it will make a significant difference in driving housing supply, both public and private, in our economy. He's reformed and streamlined the approval process for new build social housing projects this week, making a real difference, streamlining the process to try and drive the approval for social housing across our economy. He's brought through significant reforms and expansion of the remit of the Land Development Agency, again to drive the supply of social and affordable housing right across Ireland. He's established on Commission Planala 3-year planning permission extensions in certain cases are being made. He's revised the national planning framework to ensure we've more zoned land, and we have, again, to try and increase the supply of homes across our economy. He's the short-term letting reforms bill with heads of bill has been agreed, and this will help release thousands of units for long-term use. He's also extended the First Home scheme to 2027. He's agreed the new Housing Activation Office to try and coordinate the supply of homes across local authorities in our country, and he's also secured €715 million in additional funding for more social, affordable and cost rental homes, alongside a significant programme of acquisitions. So I absolutely reject what you've said there relating to the series of measures that Minister Brown has taken, which will cumulatively make a difference in driving the supply of housing across our economy. In terms of the issue of homelessness, I and all of us in government are disappointed by the increase in figures that we've seen. But we know that the real solution to trying to reduce homelessness is to increase the supply of social and affordable homes. And it's in that context that there's been a concentrated effort on preventions and exits, and that's been reflected in the figures as well around Q1 of 2025. Nationwide, 642 households, including 850 adults and 369 families, were prevented from entering emergency accommodation by way of a tenancy being created, for example, in Q1 of 2025. And to your question on tenant in situ, one of the first measures we took as a government was to provide €325 million in 2025 for local authorities to buy second-hand properties, with a particular focus on tenant in situ acquisitions. And this is an important part of the overall allocation for 2025. Separately, I'm working with Minister Brown on the National Development Plan, and central to that will be a focus on housing supply in our economy, but not only on direct subsidy for housing, also how we can invest in our water, in terms of water and wastewater infrastructure, in our grid, and also in our transport infrastructure to drive the overall supply of homes.
Thank you, Minister.
And if you look at the series of reforms he's taken,
Minister,
this will make a
Deputy
difference.
Bacik to respond.
Well, Minister, again, you and your government seem to be content to express disappointment, to say that measures you're taking will have an effect. The reality is, for people across the country facing eviction, there is no hope, no lifeline. You say that increasing supply is the key priority. Of course it should be. That's absolutely right. But instead of seeing a ramping up of construction activity, we've seen delays and pauses in the building of social homes. Just in the last week, we've seen further delays announced. We've seen the filleting of the tenant in situ scheme. Councils telling us, Cork City Council, saying they're curtailing the scheme that was supposed to offer the lifeline for families in facing homelessness. You know, the lifeline to keep families out of homelessness. So far from energy, what we're seeing from your government and your minister is inertia, a failure to act, a lethargy which leaves people in despair. And you know, people are telling us they have no hope of any prospect of owning or even being able to rent their own home, because there is so little out there. So what are you offering in the now for people facing eviction?
Well, I've referenced a series of actions that have been taken: strengthening the Land Development Agency, continuing to support the increased supply of social and affordable homes, the measures that Minister Brown has taken to cut through some of the bureaucracy that exists around the 4-stage approval process and reform that. He has taken a series of measures which will increase the supply of social and affordable homes. Central to the new National Development Plan will be an increased allocation, all focused on housing. That is our central and #1 focus as a government, is driving the supply of thousands of new homes right across our country. But that requires reform in how systems operate. You're just asking for additional allocations. We need to change how some of the systems are presently. Well, you know, you haven't given credit to Minister Brown for some of the measures he has taken in recent weeks, which will make a difference in the context of social and affordable homes. And in terms of tenant in situ, we have provided additional €325 million in 2025 for local authorities to buy second-hand homes. And that will make a difference
Deputy
for families
Cian
that face
O'Callaghan of
homelessness.
the Social Democrats.
Firstly, I just want to extend our sympathies to all the family and colleagues of Brother Kevin Crowley. He is someone who gave his life to serve others. Minister, you didn't tell people during the election campaign that a vote for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael would be a vote to increase college fees. Now, you've been asked twice, Minister. I'll ask you a third time. In September, what fees are students going to have to pay? Is it going to be €2,000 or €3,000? It's a simple, straightforward question that you've been asked twice. I've asked you a third time, and I'd ask you, Minister, to answer this and give it a straight answer. Minister, there's now complete disarray and open revolt in government over student fees. Last night, Junior Minister Michael Healy-Rae announced that he is not happy about this mess. He said he signed up to a programme for government that clearly promised to reduce fees and described the threat to increase them by €1,000 as a Scud missile that nobody was expecting. So can you stop the pretence that what is going on is part of the normal budgetary process? Nobody is buying that spin, not even your own junior ministers in government. Your government promised to continue to reduce student fees, and you're now threatening to break that promise and increase them by a whopping 50%. That is what is happening here. So answer the question on it and clarify that that's not what's happening then, Minister. You don't have to lecture us, Minister, and the public on budgetary planning. There was enough of that yesterday. What we're talking about here is trust in politics and promises broken within months of them being made. You've repeatedly cited economic threats as a reason to ditch your commitments to students and their families, but the programme for government was written only a few months ago at the end of January and finished at the end of January. We're not talking about the dim and distant past here, Minister. Are you really telling us that commitments made a mere 5 months ago are now to be on the chopping block? Minister, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that the government just doesn't get it. You don't get the immense pressure on students and families from soaring costs. You don't get the level of rising panic at the thought of having to find an extra €1,000 or even more for families with multiple students. You've spoken at length about the government's budget process, but Minister, what about family budgets? Do you understand household budgets, that they relied on government commitment to reduce student fees? They made plans on that basis, and you are now ripping up that pledge and ripping up those household plans. At a time when every penny has to be counted to make ends meet, this is causing huge levels of stress and anxiety. Where are families and students meant to find that extra €1,000? Minister, I'm really struggling to understand what the government is doing here and why this fiasco is continuing to run and hasn't been sorted out. Is it because the Taoiseach is away and nobody else is capable of making decisions on this? So, Minister, we've heard enough bluster on this. The government made a commitment in writing, in black and white, to reduce student fees. Are you going to uphold that commitment? And will you answer the question, what will fees be in September?
Well, you can't just dismiss budgetary planning as if it's not a proper part of how government operates and how politics should operate as part of, like for you to just dismiss that and say we should have ad hoc decisions on measures that we've taken every week. That's not the appropriate way to run the budgetary process. And what I said very clearly yesterday, and what I've said again today, is we acknowledge the pressure that many families and students face. That is absolutely understood by everyone within government. But what we've said is that what we'll do around the budgetary process and in the coming period is that we'll examine the cost of education paper which Minister Lawless is working on. That will inform the ongoing negotiation as part of Budget 2026. And in that budget, we'll make decisions around how we can support continued affordability of public services. And obviously a key part of that is further and higher education. What we're saying is we will do that within the confines of what we set out on Budget Day. And that has been the way that annualised budgeting has worked for many, many years. And you shouldn't dismiss that. So what we've said very clearly is that we're going to move away from one-off temporary measures. And the last series of budgets, what that meant last year was that the measures that taken relating to third-level fees were temporary in nature. We're approaching this year in the context of seeing how we can provide continued and permanent changes for next year, for example. Minister Lawless is looking at that in the context of SUSI grants, reckonable income, and also the student contribution fee. And I mean that is the that's what we're saying to people. It's around budget 2026 that we'll set out what measures will be taken for next year, and that's the and that's how we're engaging in this. So I think it's unfair to just dismiss that in terms of just referencing politics and whatever else you've said there. I think that's unfair to the budgetary process. That it's important across every measure in government that we set out the overall allocation, which will inform tax and expenditure policy for next year, and we'll engage in good faith with all our ministerial colleagues around their priorities, and obviously affordability in education is one of them, and that's fully understood by everybody within government, and it's through the budgetary decisions that we make that we'll then set out what the fee threshold will be next year. And that was the same in previous years when we had a cost of living package and a permanent package. What we're saying this year is the measures we take, we want to have be made on a permanent and sustained basis. And it's on that basis that we're engaging in budget 26.
Minister, I'll ask you for a fourth time. In September, what are fees going to be? Are they going to be €2,000 or €3,000? That's the fourth time you've been asked that question. So if you can give a direct answer to that question, what are students and their families going to be hit with in September on college fees? Can you answer that question? And in terms of dismissing things, it seems that this government is dismissing what you've promised to students and their families in the programme for government to reduce student fees. It seems that you're dismissing the concerns of families in terms of their household budgeting. Anyone reading the programme for government in black and white, seeing the commitment to reduce fees, would reasonably have thought the fees would be going down, not up, Minister. So you're dismissing that, and you're dismissing the concerns of households and families. They need certainty, they need clarity. You've been asked 4 times here today to provide certainty and clarity on this, and you failed to do so. So this is giving you a final opportunity to actually clarify. Is it €2,000 or €3,000 this September?
The programme for government is centrally important, and that informs all ministers in how they negotiate in any budget. And obviously what's referenced in terms of the programme for government relating to students in third level is what will inform Minister Lawless's budgetary negotiation. What's happened in previous years when temporary one-off measures were taken, they were taken in the aftermath of the start of an academic year. So whatever decisions are made in the context of the budget around reducing the cost of education, obviously that would be deducted through an academic year if a decision is made on that. And that's what has happened in the previous years when it came to temporary one-off or cost of living packages. So what we're saying is the budget will inform what measures are taken relating to student contribution fees, SUSI grants, reckonable income, and affordability for students is a key priority for Minister Lawless as part of the budget discussions which will take place.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Catherine Connolly.
Corla, agus ara tá an deis á hapu aga minis. Chorus étrum, chorus Iarnród umpar a haláthair do Cathair na Gaillimhe. Agus is tótha tá an ceist thar a bheith tábhachtach. Agus is sí an ceistí ná riire an bhfuil an dánacht ionad, an bhfuil an crógacht ionad, ceannaireacht a haspáins agus glacú leis an cuincreab seo, chorus Iarnród éadrom a haláthair do Cathair na Gaillimhe. Minister, I'm seizing the opportunity with you today particularly, although I would have dearly loved to have raised Gaza as well, but I'm raising this with you as Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. And the decision to roll out a light rail system in Galway requires courage, vision and leadership. And I'm specifically asking you, do you have that courage to embrace this project and roll out a light rail system for Galway as part of the solution to the chronic traffic congestion? The provision of a light rail system perfectly aligns with the national policy objectives in the revised National Planning Framework. And specifically, I'll refer to objectives 10 and 97, required a transport-orientated development approach served by a high-capacity public transport in the metropolitan areas of the 5 cities destined to grow, Galway being one of them. Moreover, at section 2.1 of the revised National Planning Framework, it clearly sets out that the 4 cities, including Galway, will require the potential of all 4 cities to be realised at an unprecedented rate to create viable alternatives to Dublin. We have any amount of policies that this provision of light rail complies with. But let me just look at climate action and climate change, where it will actively help to reduce our emissions. In relation to the costs of not doing something, the Department of Transport very helpfully published a report, The Economic Cost of Congestion in the Regional Cities. At a minimum, on an annual basis at the moment, traffic congestion in Galway is costing 35 million. That will rise to an estimate 107 million and more in 2040. We're not talking here about the costs of fines. We're not talking about here the costs of lack of productivity, the costs of travelling and so on. And not alone that, but that report clearly said we need a more proactive deployment of sustainable transport for the growing traffic congestion in Galway. I'm saying clearly on the record that a huge amount of work has been done in relation to this project. A feasibility study has been published. It says it's eminently doable. Glue on the ground, in addition to 24,000 signatures that I collected in 2018, says this, are begging the government to do this.
Thanks very much, Deputy Connolly, and familiar with the serious congestion which exists in Galway City and indeed in the broader Galway region. And as you know, the National Transport Authority has been developing the Galway Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy to inform what's possible for the future in the context of public transport, but also road infrastructure in the Galway region with and in conjunction with Galway City Council and Galway County Council. And part of the development of this Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy necessitates the mode-specific analysis being undertaken for a light rail feasibility study and also the strategic roads feasibility study. And that was published, the light rail study was published by the NTA on the 30th of October 2024. And the backdrop here is obviously the ongoing consideration of the ring road, which you're familiar with, but also I know the demand within Galway City for light rail. What we're doing within the National Development Plan, first of all, is prioritising transport infrastructure more generally. And that will involve a serious uplift in investment in transport infrastructure over the next 5 years, but also to set out a longer-term position to really give confidence to the development of public transport infrastructure in our cities and between our towns and within our regions in particular. So obviously the work that's going on with the Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy will help inform what's possible in the short to medium term. And I know that's being progressed by the 2 respective councils. And certainly I'm open as Minister to that engagement. We've had a kind of stop-start nature to light rail both here in Dublin and also in other parts. I think we do need, it's an effective way of delivering public transport in urban areas, and I think we need to have a better pipeline of light rail over the longer term, and I think the National Transport Authority and TAI need to work on that in terms of the respective metropolitan area transport strategies. But I think for Galway, the immediate position is obviously there's a lot of interest in Galway, as you know, on the development of the ring road for many citizens and people that you represent, but also people in Galway who want to see light rail developed as an option within the urban sphere. Congestion is a serious issue, and I canvassed in Galway on many occasions last year. Public transport and the ring road were probably 50% of the issues raised on the door with many people that I engaged with. And I think as a government, with our prioritisation of transport infrastructure, we want to make real progress on some of the projects which can be started quickly, but also set out the longer term position around the area transport strategy about what can be delivered for Galway and the broader West of Ireland region over the coming period.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy.
Minister, I welcome the fact that you're going to prioritise transport in the revised plan. There's no sense of urgency when it comes to Galway City. Its growth has been hampered. It simply can't develop. I haven't time to go into the lack of infrastructure when it comes to basic sewage facilities. That's for another day, and I've raised it before. I'm sticking with just one issue today as one part of a sustainable solution. 2018, 24,000 people signed a petition appealing to the government to carry out a feasibility study. That took till last year. We cannot grow Galway. It's just a pretence and a mockery to say Galway can grow. It can't. There's a lack of infrastructure. Then we have obligations under our climate action plans. And one of the easiest way and the straightest way to comply with those obligations is to run out a public transport system, light rail and park and ride. Park and ride went into the city development plan in 2004, 21 years. It still hasn't been run out. What we need is vision, boldness from a government, boldness in the best sense of the word, to give the thumbs up to a light rail, put it into the revised, I'm going to finish, the revised National Planning Framework. And finally, there is a presentation in the AV room today at 3 o'clock, and I would invite all of you to that presentation in relation to light rail. Garmag.
Thanks very much, Deputy Connolly. And look, I think we all share the objectives of significantly improving transport infrastructure for Galway City, and obviously the work that's been undertaken around the feasibility study for light rail is important in that context. I know the National Transport Authority are considering that with the two respective councils. There has been significant investment in Cant Station, as you know, and to try and improve the connectivity with commuters. We've had it with More and others where there's been investment and upgrades. There's been a significant work undertaken relating to bus connects in Galway as well. But look, I acknowledge, and that's why I think I welcome the work that's been undertaken around the feasibility study for light rail in particular. And as I said previously, I think we need to build more momentum on having more light rail in some of our urban areas where, compared to our last number of years where we've had a stop-start nature to it. It's an effective way of delivering public transport as we've seen in Dublin, for example, and that's something that will be considered in the context of the National Development Plan.
We now move to other members' questions. Deputy Paul McAuliffe.